Welcome everyone, I'm the Hero, and today we'll be revisiting Capcom's 2005 crowd fighter Sengoku BASARA, or as known in the West, Devil Kings. Now, you might be asking why we're doing this, and the reason is actually fairly simple. Back when I made the original review, I couldn't compare the two games as I had only owned the Western release, so while the review itself was alright, I found it incomplete. Now I have almost every game in the series, only missing 3 Utage and the vanilla version of 4, so I figured what better way to start off slowly making our way through the series than finally making a complete review of the first game. Sengoku BASARA is structured not too dissimilarly to fighting games. You choose a character who will have to take on the main scenario where they come out on top, the main scenario being the events of the Warring States era or Sengoku Jidai, hence the name. Our main protagonists are Date Masamune and Sanada Yukimura in the original and Oda Nobunaga in Devil Kings respectively. Although as previously stated, these guys being the chosen protagonists matters little considering you can choose who you want to take the center stage. The games adapt the events between Nobunaga's defeat of Imagama Yoshimoto and his death in the fire at Honnoji. Devil Kings localized this by just filing off the serial numbers, so just pretend I didn't call out real events or names and you'll get the gist. The game features everyone's favorite Sengoku-era Japanese warlords like Takeda Shingen, Uesugi Kenshin, Itsuki, Tadakatsu Honda, and Saint Francis Xavier, as well as their subordinates like Sarutobi Sasuke and Kasuga. The Western release, however, is missing the ability to play as Maeda Toshie, Matsu, Akechi Mitsuhide, and Yoshihiro Shimazu, relegating them to only simple bosses with their own stages. Moving into the gameplay, Sengoku BASARA, being a crowd fighter, is a 3D beat-em-up, or hack and slash if you want to be anal about it, where you secure objectives on the battlefield mainly by walking up to strategically named people and juggling them into submission, alongside their subordinates, and potentially even the rest of the region. Though it needs to be said that while the Musou series of games focus on quantity of enemy combatants to really sell the greatness of our player characters, Senbasa opts for a more quality over quantity approach, which means they have less enemies on screen, but those enemies usually have a better defined role that they are ever so slightly more competent at. The games would grow into making these distinctions more apparent as the series went on, but you can already see the seeds if you have experience with the later games. And before we move into the nitty-gritty, we should probably hit that there's a difference in difficulty between this game's versions. What used to be easy in Sengoku BASARA is gone from Devil Kings. Normal is easy, hard is normal, and I'm not sure what accursed from Tusavi is hiding under the hard option in Devil Kings, since I don't think Heaven difficulty had been invented yet for Senbasa. One major difference between the original and Western releases is the controls. To start off with the potentially more familiar, in Devil Kings you have a light attack on 1, a heavy attack on 2, a modifier to gain access to special moves on the right bumper, and blocking on the left bumper. Meanwhile in Sengoku BASARA, you have your attack button on 1, special button on 2, the ability to switch between specials on the left bumper, blocking on the right bumper, and hey, wait a minute! Those don't sound conducive to sharing the same moveset! Well, yeah, that's because Capcom made alterations to the characters' movesets to accommodate the change. These changes range from giving everyone a second, new string on heavy attack that usually applies a debuff that multiplies attacks when procced, a state I don't think ever returned to past Devil Kings, though I could be wrong, to things like how Masamune's BASARA attack goes through a fully animated sequence where he pulls out all of his swords while switching stances and ending him in full stance for a couple of seconds or until you get hit, to an ever so slightly buff version of War Dance, Masamune's stance switch special in OG Senbasa, that now has an added launch on being triggered. Now, for the next bit, we're gonna be busting a myth that I'm not even sure still prevails, but was pretty widespread, or, well, as widespread as it could get within the Senbasa niche I suppose, back in the day from what I remember, which is that in the Japanese version you can charge your BASARA just like the CPU. Now, I have done the extensive research of pressing every button combination I could think of that might make sense during regular play, and I can assure you that no! You can't just get any free meter whenever. That's what the pickup system is for. In Sengoku BASARA, you get two methods of play. First, there's the game's variant of the arcade ladder, Conquest Mode, where depending on the version you're playing, you're faced with either a map of Japan or whatever the hell this place is, and test with uniting the land by expanding your territory and doing murder. A lot of murder! But the world is not static, and you're not the only one trying to gain control. Your neighbors, your neighbors' neighbors, your neighbors' neighbors' neighbors, that weirdo from accounting, they're all trying to unite Japan under their rule. So after each movement you make, you get a battle report of what's been happening in other places. This means that you're unable to fight everyone in just one go around, but it also leads to some funny developments, like how Mori always seems to kill or at least attack Mitsuhide at turn 1, so I don't even have Mitsuhide's level unlocked on my current memory card. Don't know what their beef is. The other method of play is free play, where you can choose to replay stages you visited in Conquest mode with any warlord of your choosing, unless you wish to play a stage that has them as a boss. This is good not just for being able to play the game without being confined to doing a full playthrough as that character, but also because of how character growth happens in Sengoku BASARA. You see, Senbasa has a light RPG system where the characters have levels and you can choose certain things such as pieces of equipment, as well as what 2 specials you want to use before every level. What difficulty level you're on determines how much experience you gain, so because of the aforementioned fuckery those went through doing localization, you will have a more difficult time leveling up in Devil Kings, at least unless you're really keen on doing this game's equivalent of no upgrades Dante must die as your first exposure to the series. Gaining levels is beneficial as all level ups bestow you with greater defense and attack stats, deepen your health pool, and every couple of levels you might even unlock a new special. Once we get past this screen, however, is when we get to the main event. The war spoils, which you find in boxes you get by killing named characters. Yes, base leader is a name, I don't make the rules. These boxes can contain anything from weapons to accessories to money. The former might be self-explanatory. They may be higher quality than what you currently have equipped, or otherwise fill a different niche, and in the accessories case, they might do some more involved stuff, but we'll get back to that. The latter, however, is not real money, at least not to us, as money is a social construct invented by the shogunate so they don't have to give me the 13 koku of rice I'm owed. Instead, money gives you additional experience and is basically the pity payout, so you at least get something for completing the levels with boxes. But it's also the only thing I've been getting for a long while, so what the hell does that make me? Accessories could be fairly simple or somewhat involved. They generally range from here's a boost to your attack to this specific enemy type can't hurt you anymore. And in my experience, you're more likely to receive them as drops, but your mileage may vary. Moving on to the localization aspect, there's some subtle and not so subtle ways localization affected the game in the West. From turning onigiri and sake into green and purple colored jamish discs, to finding of the serial numbers on the characters. In an interview with IGN, producer Hiroyuki Kobayashi said the following regarding the differences between Eastern and Western releases.
Basically, the concept behind this is that until now, I've worked on many projects that have sold well overseas. Of course, Resident Evil 5, Devil May Cry, games like that. What I want to do this time is make a game that would really sell well in Japan. You look at sales numbers and you see that Dynasty Warriors games sold really well. And I thought, well, we've got Killer 7, which is totally new and might sell well in Japan. Well, let's do something that we know will sell. We wanted to make something in a similar vein, a similar style as those types of games. In Japan, Devil Kings is called Sengoku BASARA, and focuses on Japanese history in the same sense that Dynasty Warriors focuses on Chinese history. So it's similar in that sense, but with a Capcom style, a Capcom flair to it. We took the concept and said, what can we do to differentiate this, to make this different from the Dynasty Warriors games? And we decided the secret maybe lay in some other games Capcom has done. We said, let's give the characters a kind of Devil May Cry flair. Some really cool moves, like the kind of things you might see in Devil May Cry. Let's the characters and make them all vastly and distinctly different from one another. Like Street Fighter 2. That's the Japanese version. Then we said, okay, let's release it in North America. What can we do to make it different again? So we said, okay, we'll make it dark. Call it Devil Kings. The main character sold his soul to the devil. We'll darken up the background, give more moves, more ability to power your character up, and things like that for the American market. The Japanese version of the game is based on Japanese history. There are some fantasy elements that didn't actually happen, of course, but enough of it is there. With the US version, we've taken that element out entirely. Some of the backgrounds may retain that Eastern flair. Many of them don't, and are brand new. Many of the enemies are brand new, and it's no longer based around the idea of feudal Japan at all. That part of the game has now been changed to be darker, devilish.
As for how much of this has actually been implemented and how much of it was PR speak, the map layouts are the same between the games. The characters do not differ in design unless you want to count their movesets differences to accommodate the additional attack button, and the environments where changes have been made are very much in the minority. With the only one coming to mind for me is Ujimasa's level, where they replace his foot soldiers with Anubises. Anubai? Outside of these, the changes are generally on the minor side, with the aforementioned changes to pickups, giving each accessory a makeover, and small stuff like giving Itsuki a fantasy hammer made of ice instead of the wooden one she sports usually.
It looks like someone needs
Otherwise, character dialogue seems mostly intact and properly translated, same for the Ctrl-H replacement of person and place names to their Western aliases. The anime cutscenes are here and without any editorialization to make it less obvious when and where we are. And even the intro is mostly intact, though those of us with Devil Kings are missing out on crossfires by TM Revolution, which I of course cannot demo here under threat of death. Arigatou gozaimashita, Sony Music Japan. Though honestly, one of the major unsung losses between Western and Eastern releases is in the character intros. The Devil Kings intros are not bad by any stretch, but the original Sengoku BASARA intros, which, may I note, only had aesthetic differences to the Devil Kings counterparts but otherwise uses the same animations and camera angles, feel more finished, more whole thanks to the added bells and whistles the letterboxing receives, whereas they get a darker tone in Devil Kings. Literally. As for the presentation, the game looks fine. While they can act as a sudden cut in the pacing, I like the little cutscenes we get to explain changes in the map's state or additional objectives. The character designs are interesting enough, and I also can't think of any particularly bad performances, although turning Itsuki, the North Japanese girl whose level is 100% snow, into a Southern Belle was certainly a decision Capcom and or the localizers made. And for the music, well, I can't help but call it good, at least because in Crowd Fighters, most of the soundtrack is, and should be, pure BGM. Sometimes particularly good tracks slip through the cracks, and you love to see that, but more often than not, if a track becomes noticeable, it's because it has overstayed its welcome. The challenge these soundtracks face is that they need to write a loop that you can listen to for 10, 15, 20 or even more minutes with only the one track, so they can get too wild with the compositions or else it will get obnoxious quickly. Yet it is also usually a problem that the music is very safe but has a very noticeable bit on the loop, landing us back at the start, but all of that is more genre-wide issues rather than ones Sengoku BASARA suffers from. So overall, big surprise I know, but I really like Sengoku BASARA. Both versions have pros and cons, but honestly that only really comes down to the control scheme and small changes they made in the characters' kits. Otherwise, the original beats Devil Kings by virtue of not masquerading as a fantasy game and having a difficulty selection that doesn't put the player at a disadvantage. If you go back to these games, you can clearly see the base upon which the intricacies of the later games were built. And funnily enough, you do need to play both versions to get the full picture for reasons we'll probably come back to once we hit 3. But even at such an early stage, the characters and levels are fun. The kits only feel wanting in hindsight of having played the rest of the series, well, assuming you unlock some specials, and thanks to the way Conquest mode works, it's always a good pick up and play game for an hour or two. Okay, now I just need to figure out how to spin my wrist like a Lego pick so I can propel myself forward with only swords.